Hello, it's Book Quote Wednesday and the word is several. Today I am reading from my young adult fantasy, The Teen, the Witch and the Thief. 4 years ago, my teen hero's Ted's younger brother went suddenly catatonic. Still physically present, but his mind just gone, completely wiped. Now, the evil magician that we call the Thief has brought Ted into the realm of meta-Salisbury, the place where all the information that defines the city and people of Salisbury, past, present and future, is all stored together. And it turns out that these two things are related. Ted has just stepped out of the front door of what is sort of his house. Ghosts moved purposefully along the busy road that ran past 34 Henderson Close. Ted stretched his neck out and peeked left and right, not wanting to move any further than he had to from the security of his own home. Opposite him, and to his left and right, should have been the familiar, modern, identical houses of Henderson Close, Stephen's Place and others like it. Henderson Close should have been a quiet cul-de-sac. Now number 34 is just one house on a busy road. On either side, numbers 32 and 36 morphed into rows of buildings Ted had never seen before, old and modern and every stage in between. Some of the buildings looked as if they had been built to be vague and indistinct, though how you went about designing an indistinct building Ted had no idea. This was a residential street, but somehow it was composed of many different residential streets. Ted recognized the ambience immediately, the feeling that there were many more buildings crammed into one space than should be physically possible, the sensation of seeing everything separately all at once. He had felt it briefly that one time in the Mall. This was the same place. Well, same city. Presumably the Mall was here somewhere. A spectral car pulled up further down the road and the transparent family climbed out with the shopping. The ghost of a normal 21st century woman walked her dog slightly above the pavement, not noticing the 6-inch gap between her feet and the ground. A man walked straight through her in the other direction and dwindled very quickly as he walked away, as if he were walking down a long tunnel. It was almost like this wasn't just one street, it was many different streets, and somehow they were all here at once. Now, why did that seem a familiar idea, he wondered. But that fragile little thought wasn't so much put to one side as swept away to the back of his mind by the overwhelming flood of sensory data. The light was dim, as if the whole thing were inside an old brown sepia photograph. Ted glanced up at the sky and suddenly his eyes watered and he looked quickly back to earth again. There was no sky. It wasn't light, it wasn't dark, there was no sun or moon or clouds, there was just no sky. Across the shifting rooftops he could see the spire of the cathedral. At least something was familiar. Ted retreated a few steps back into the house and closed the door, unlocked it and put on the chain. Then he walked up against the wall of the hall and slid down into a crouch. And there he stayed for he didn't know how long. He gazed blankly at the door, which was all that stood between the comforting familiarity of home and the weirdness outside. It was a very tenuous security, but it was all he had. "Maybe I'm dead," Ted said out loud, just to hear a familiar voice. It sounded much too loud. "Maybe something killed me and this is the afterlife." He was a little surprised that it didn't really upset him. Then he thought of Robert and Sarah and his mum, who would never see him again, until presumably they died too, and how upset they would be. That saddened him, but only a little. It would piss Barry off too, which was some consolation. True, at first glance it wasn't an afterlife he felt familiar with from his RE lessons. He quickly ran through the list of usual options in his head. Heaven, happy place. Hell, nasty. Reincarnation, or nothing. This was obviously not nothing, it was something. He obviously wasn't being reincarnated because he was still Ted. He held his hands in front of him for inspection, then gave the rest of himself a quick once over just to be sure. Definitely still Ted, down to the scar at the base of his finger where he had once put it through a window. He fingered his chin and found the spot that he had woken up with and which wasn't quite squeezable yet. Hell? Couldn't see any demons. Heaven? No angels. Maybe none of the religions had got it right. Maybe there was no empty void, no demons with pitchforks, no being reborn as a woodlouse. Just this. He could do whatever he liked. Just him and a shape-shifting cat. Forever. "Yay," he muttered. "On with the sinning." The front door rattled and Ted pressed himself even further back against the wall. The weird world outside was trying to get in. Could he stop it? His eyes fixed on the door handle. In a movie, it would have been moving slowly up and down. This one just rattled some more. He had locked it so it couldn't move. There was a thump as of a frustrated foot kicking the door from the other side. Ted moved slowly forward, careful not to make a noise, and peered with one eye through the spy hole. Outside was the same scene as before, distorted by the fisheye lens, but there was no one there. The handle rattled again, and the door came in for some more kicks. Ted couldn't quite believe that some invisible force was trying to get into the house, but couldn't get through a perfectly normal white UPVC front door. Or maybe, he realised suddenly, it was a perfectly visible force, just one that was too small to be seen through the lens. Someone small enough could stand close enough to the door that the lens wouldn't show them. He peeked cautiously back through the hole, and this time he did see something moving right at the bottom of his vision. It was the tousled, matted top of someone's head. The someone stepped back and glared up at the house, and Ted saw the whole person. For just a moment his brain refused to acknowledge that it was who his eyes said, but then, even without his brain's permission, his hands were fumbling, tearing at the lock and at the chain. It should have taken seconds, but it seemed to take forever to pull the door open, and Ted was sobbing in case the opportunity passed and the visitor was swallowed up by the ground or just walked away into this strange world. But then the door was open and the child outside was staring up at him, and Ted could feel a huge smile splitting his face. "Robs!" He stepped forward, once, twice, afraid that the slightest vibration would make this illusion disappear. "Robs, it's me!" It was the Robert of 4 years ago, a 9-year-old little boy, but he was still Ted's brother. His face was grimy, his clothes were tattered, and his hair was tangled and filthy. What exalted Ted's heart was his expression. He looked intelligent. This was a face with emotion going on behind it, the first Ted had seen in 4 years. Unfortunately, the emotion was fear. Robert slowly backed away. Ted took another step, and Robert backed away a little faster, staring at Ted as if he had just been confronted with a blood-stained murderer wielding an axe. "Hey, Robs, come on, you remember me? Ted?" "Ted?" Ted had forgotten how high a 9-year-old's voice was. And he realised it worked both ways. Robert would remember Ted aged 12. In Robert's mind, Ted would be several inches shorter, with a voice that could sing treble. So Ted sat down on the front steps and looked his brother in the eye. "Look, I'm probably bigger than you, remember? My voice broke, okay? It happens. But it's me, I'm Ted." Robert looked sideways at him. Suspicion stamped on his face, but he edged a little closer. Ted kept trying. We played football, remember? In the garden?" Robert had sidled to within a few feet of him. He peered into Ted's face. "Why are you all spotty?" "It goes with the voice breaking," Ted said wryly. A smile spread slowly across Robert's face, and then suddenly he flung himself at Ted and nearly knocked him flat. "I knew you'd come and get me, I knew you would," he sobbed. They were curled up together on the sofa in the living room. Robert was nestled snugly against Ted, secure in his big brother's hug. Ted hadn't realised 9-year-olds were so little. "There's this witch," Robert said darkly. "She's in charge. Sort of long robes and..." Ted brushed his hair back. "Really weird hair?" "Yeah." Ted groaned. "Figured. If this was the same place as the Mall, why shouldn't she be here too?" "Okay, I've seen her. What does she do?" Robert stayed quiet, but Ted felt him begin to tremble as if a major tantrum was on its way to the surface. He tightened his arms. Okay, never mind." "She's in charge," Robert said again. "I was so scared when I got here. Ted, I really was. You were gone and everyone was gone, and I really wanted you to come and get me back, Ted." "Yeah," Ted said softly. "I'm sorry it took me so long. I kept watching the house because I thought that's where you come. You got really big, Ted, and your voice is funny." Ted smiled. "Yeah, it's been a while." He gave Robert a tickle, which made the little boy squeal with delighted laughter. They subsided together and stayed quiet for a moment, just relishing being with each other. Then Robert butted Ted gently with his head. "I like it that you're big," he said with a shy smile. "Are you going to take me home now?" Ted thought for a moment, then helplessly said, "Eh." There was nothing Ted would have liked more. There was also nothing he knew how to do less. "I want to go home, Ted," Robert mumbled. Ted gave him a comforting squeeze. "Yeah, me too, but I don't know how." "It's easy. She does it all the time." Ted paused. "She what?" Robert looked up at him. "The witch. She goes to our world all the time. I've seen her." Ted frowned. "So why didn't you just follow her?" Robert's face screwed up as if he was about to cry again. "I was scared, Ted. I couldn't get close to where she does it." He snuggled against his brother again with adoring eyes. "But I bet you can." "Right," Ted murmured. "Oh, really?" Robert looked at him with 9-year-old earnestness. "I can show you where she does it." He hopped off the sofa and pulled Ted to his feet. Then he led Ted by the hand to the front door and opened it and pointed. "That's where." "Well, of course," Ted said flatly after a moment. "Like, duh." The spire of the cathedral rose above the roofs of the shimmering city. Remember, you can buy my books at www.benjeeps.com. See you next time.